Have you ever picked up a hitchhiker? My friend and I were pulling onto the highway yesterday when suddenly a Mexican-looking kid waved us down and ran up to our window. He was carrying a suitcase, the big ones like we take on international vacations, and it seemed as if he had been walking for some time. Judging from his appearance, I figured he was prob 20 to 21 years old. He asked us if he could get a ride to Greyhound. We both looked at each other and understood that he was saying Greyhound, and the only Greyhound bus stop in town was at this gas station a few miles down the road. It was cold and windy out and we had some spare time, so we told him to jump in. Initially thoughts run through your head and you wonder, I wonder what's in that suitcase. Is he going to put a knife to my neck from behind the seat? Lots of powdered sugar from Mexico because this is South Texas, a chopped up body. But as we began to drive, I saw the sigh of relief through the rear view mirror and realized this kid is just happy for a ride. When we got to the gas station, my friend walked in and double-checked everything to make sure it was the right spot, but to our surprise the final bus for Houston left for the day. The next bus at 6:00 p.m. was in a town 25 miles over. We tried explaining this to him. I should have paid more attention in the Spanish Iron 2 they forced us to take in high school. The only words I can really say are si and comprende. My friend and I said frick it, let's drop him off, and turned to him and said, listen, we are going to eat first, making hand gestures showing spoons entering mouth, and we will drop you off after. But homeboy was still clueless and kept nodding. We already ordered Chinese food and began driving in that direction, and when we got there, he got out of the car and went to the trunk as if the Chinese restaurant was the bus stop. We tell him to come in and eat something first, leave the suitcase in the car. He is still clueless. When we go in, our food was already ready. We decided to eat there so he could eat as well. When the hostess came over, she looked Spanish, so I asked her. I was like, hey listen, we picked this guy up from the street, he missed his bus and the next one is 25 miles over, can you tell him that after we are done eating we will drop him off? It's okay, no problems. And she was kinda taken by it and laughed, translated it to the guy, and for the next 10 minutes all he kept saying was thank you. After we jumped into the car, I turned to him in the back and was like, listen, it's 25 miles, I'm rolling a spliff, do you smoke? He still had no clue, but when we sparked it up, and passed it his way, he smoked it like a champ. He had very broken English, but said he was from Ecuador and he was in America looking for a job to make money for his family back home. Like I said, he was prob 20 to 21 years old. Shortly after, we arrived at our destination, and said farewell. Dropped him off at some store where he would have to sit on a bench outside for the next hour, but I did my best. I hope he made it to wherever he had to go. My man got picked up, fed sweet and sour chicken, smoked a spliff and got a ride to a location 30 minutes away. I hope he will do the same for someone else one day. I've picked up numerous HITCHHIKERs, but one in particular stands out. His name was Garth. Garth was a heck of dude with a heck of a story. This is the encounter between my friends and Garth. After graduating high school, myself and 4 friends decided to take a long road trip over the summer, and Glacier National Park was our mecca for the trip. We found ourselves camping in the middle of nowhere in the woods of NW, Montana, some 25 miles north of Missoula. We camped illegally and got drank and stoned and pretty much stayed up all night. In the morning, I woke up in the driver's seat of my car to see some dude walking by in the road which was 40 yards away from our campsite. The guy walking couldn't see us just passing by, but I could see him. I was still half drank, so I decided to yell at him, not even thinking that it could be the owner of the land that we were illegally camping on. He did a 180 and stared straight at me and began walking towards me. He had a single backpack, a big tree limb for a walking stick, and looked exhausted and hungry. He looked like the Big Lebowski mixed with Saul from Pineapple Express, but acted like someone who had just had the butt kicked, mentally and physically. He looked like someone had sucked his soul out of him. My friends had heard me yelling for him, so they had stirred awake to find, to their surprise, Garth sitting in one of our lawn chairs eating our stale Doritos like he hadn't eaten anything in days. We would later learn that was actually true. It was about 10 a.m. by the time we decided to leave the campsite and head back to Missoula to find food. Garth hopped in the car and began to tell his story of how he ended up in the middle of nowhere, Montana. He Saturday big boom and talked while my friend Saturday behind him, ready for Garth to try to hurt us or something crazy. The story that Garth told us was freaking crazy. It basically went something like this. Some dude he met in Missoula promised him some work on his land. Apparently, the guy bought some land and needed some trees and brush cleared so he could start building a house. He said he would let Garth stay on his land for the night and meet him there in the morning with some tools and some food so they could work all day to clear this brush. Well, one day went by, then another, and another and another. The guy never showed up and Garth was on this guy's land for 5 freaking days with no food or shelter. He luckily had a stream of water on his land that Garth drank to keep hydrated, but catching food was next to impossible. He said he could hear coyotes very close to him at night, and one morning he woke up to a bull moose 30 yards away from, snorting and stomping its hooves on the ground, ready to charge. Garth ran up a tree and stayed there for the rest of the day. He said he didn't want to leave the land because he had no idea where he was and he was hoping that the guy would show up to take him back to town. It wasn't until this particular morning that he said he was so hungry and cold that he thought he was going to die if he didn't start walking somewhere. Garth said he started following a logging road with the hope it would lead him somewhere. He had been walking all night with no signs of anything. He actually thought he was walking in circles. He said that the coyotes were howling and he was the most scared he had ever been in his life. We were the first sign of people he had seen in almost 6 days. After told us this story, we were said we wanted to buy him a lunch and some beers and a coat. He immediately declined. He seemed embarrassed by the situation, especially because some 18-year-olds were going to buy him this stuff. We understood where he was coming from, but this guy just had 6 days of heck in the woods and he deserved a hot meal. He finally said he would eat lunch with us, so we took him to a Chinese buffet where he ate down 4 fat plates, like a boss. After lunch he asked us to take him to the homeless shelter in town so he could get a shower and get a bed for the night. We agreed and took him across town to drop him off. The car ride over was quiet, mainly because Garth dozed off, probably from his exhaustion. He was still sleeping when we got to the homeless shelter. We woke him up and he thanked us a million times and stumbled into the shelter. My friends and I were floored by his story. We didn't say much as we hit the road north to Glacier National Park, until we noticed something on the floor by the front seat. His freaking backpack. We were 40 miles north of town and didn't even think about what to do. We pulled over and turned around to take his backpack to him at the shelter. We contemplated opening it for a good 15 minutes. We thought it would be wrong and that we wouldn't want someone to do that to our pack. But our curiosity got the best of us and we decided to open it. Garth was too epic to not find out what he had in there to aid in his wilderness adventure. We joked about what would be in there: a bloody knife, a head, some sort of body part. What we found was truly unbelievable. We found out that Garth was bipolar and diabetic based on his medications. He had some oral glucose gel to combat his low blood sugar, a blood sugar machine and antidepressant. It blew my mind that this man, a diabetic, would even think about staying in the woods for this long while knowing he was a diabetic. We also found a notebook that had some sketches and writings, mainly about his travels around the Pacific Northwest. I wanted to read more, but we had reached the shelter to return his pack. Garth was a freaking man if I had ever met one. We thought he could use a little help, so we put $100 in his pack before we gave it back to him. He was inside sitting at a table when we arrived with his pack. I held out the pack and just said, "I think you forgot something, man." He stood up and ran over to me, grabbed it and then gave me a huge bear hug and started crying. He told me, while he was hugging me, that he thought that he had just lost everything he owned after we dropped him off. It was weird, but I felt like I had to hug him back, so I did. He followed us back out to our car and thanked us again and offered us a cup of coffee. We declined and said we had to be on our way to get there before dark. He understood and even offered to take a look at our car's oil and other stuff before we headed out. We said no, said goodbye and drove off to the corner. We were stuck at a traffic light and I could still see him in the review mirror, probably 50 to 60 yards behind us. He knelt down to dig through his backpack. He took out his glucometer, his notebook and then the $100 we had put in there. He saw it and started running after us, either to thank us or to try to give it back. The light turned green and we drove off before he got to us. I stood out the car window, gave him a wave and a peace sign. He responded with a salute and the biggest smile I've ever seen. We drove off and we never saw him again. This was our encounter with Garth, the world's manliest hobo. Wherever you are, Garth, Godspeed, my good man. I knew it was gonna be a rockin' story when you said the guy's name was Garth. My husband and I were leaving the grocery store and witnessed a big dramatic mulch theft. Yes, someone grabbed a bag of mulch, tossed it in the Jeep and sped off, tires squealing, jumping curbs. It was confusing and hilarious. The high school clerks were mostly indifferent, but there were a couple employees freaking out and running after the Jeep. Then we turn around and there is this girl standing there with her jaw hanging open, and holding a box of donuts. She just looks at us and says, demands, I need a ride. I don't know why he just did that. That's my cousin. The employees who were freaking out, kind of turn and start coming toward her now that the Jeep is gone. So we were like, okay, let's go. She lived like 2 miles away in the mobile home park. Sure enough, the Jeep was parked in the drive. For some reason her cousin just totally ditched her for a $4 bag of mulch. Disregard women, acquire gardening supplies. Just about every time I see someone I stop. I kind of got out of the habit in the last couple of years, moved to a big city and all that. My girlfriend wasn't too stoked on the practice. Then some stuff happened to me that changed me and I am back to offering rides habitually. If you would indulge me, it is long story and has almost nothing to do with hitchhiking other than happening on a road. This past year I have had 3 instances of car trouble. A blowout on a freeway, a bunch of blown fuses and an out of gas situation. All of them were while driving other people's cars, which, for some reason, makes it worse on an emotional level. It makes it worse on a practical level as well, what with the fact that I carry things like a jack and extra fuses in my car, and know enough not to park, facing downhill, on a steep incline with less than a gallon of fuel. Anyway, each of these times this stuff happened I was disgusted with how people would not bother to help me. I spent hours on the side of the freeway waiting, watching roadside assistance vehicles blow past me, for AAA to show. The 4 gas stations I asked for a gas can at told me that they couldn't loan them out, for my safety, but I could buy a really poopy 1-gallon one with no cap for $15. It was enough, each time, to make you say stuff like, this country is going to heck in a handbasket. But you know who came to my rescue all 3 times? Immigrants. Mexican immigrants. None of them spoke a lick of the language. But one of those dudes had a profound effect on me. He was the guy that stopped to help me with a blowout with his whole family of 6 in tow. I was on the side of the road for close to 4 hours. Big Jeep, blown rear tire, had a spare but no jack. I had signs in the windows of the car, big signs that said need a jack and offered money. No dice. Right as I am about to give up and just hitch out there, a van pulls over and dude bounds out. He sizes the situation up and calls for his youngest daughter who speaks English. He conveys through her that he has a jack but it is too small for the Jeep, so we will need to brace it. He produces a saw from the van and cuts a log out of a downed tree on the side of the road. We rolled it over, put his jack on top, and bam, in business. I start taking the wheel off and, if you can believe it, I broke his tire iron. It was one of those collapsible ones and I wasn't careful and I snapped the head I needed clean off. Frick. No worries, he runs to the van, gives it to his wife and she is gone in a flash, down the road to buy a tire iron. She is back in 15 minutes, we finish the job with a little sweat and cussing, stupid log was starting to give, and I am a very happy man. We are both filthy and sweaty. The wife produces a large water jug for us to wash our hands in. I tried to put a 20 in the man's hand but he wouldn't take it, so I instead gave it to his wife as quietly as I could. I thanked them up one side and down the other. I asked the little girl where they lived, thinking maybe I could send them a gift for being so awesome. She says they live in Mexico. They are here so mommy and daddy can pick peaches for the next few weeks. After that they are going to pick cherries then go back home. She asks if I have had lunch and when I told her no, she gave me a tamale from their cooler, the best fricking tamale I have ever had. So, to clarify, a family that is undoubtedly poorer than you, me, and just about everyone else on that stretch of road, working on a seasonal basis where time is money, took an hour or 2 out of their day to help some strange dude on the side of the road when people in tow trucks were just passing me by. Wow. But we aren't done yet. I thank them again and walk back to my car and open the foil on the tamale cause I am starving at this point, and what do I find inside? My fricking $20 bill. I whirl around and run up to the van and the guy rolls his window down. He sees the $20 in my hand and just shaking his head no, like he won't take it. All I can think to say is poor favor, poor favor, poor favor, with my hands out. Dude just smiles, shakes his head and, with what looked like great concentration, tried his hardest to speak to me in English. Today you, tomorrow me. Rolled up his window, drove away, his daughter waving to me in the rear view. I Saturday in my car eating the best fricking tamale of all time and I just cried. Like a little girl. It has been a rough year and nothing has broke my way. This was so out of left field I just couldn't deal. In the 5 months since I have changed a couple of tires, given a few rides to gas stations and, once, went 50 miles out of my way to get a girl to an airport. I won't accept money. Every time I tell them the same thing when we are through. Today you, tomorrow me. Too long didn't read, long rambling story about how the kindness of strangers, particularly folks from south of the border, forced me to be more helpful on the road and in life in general. I am sure it won't be as meaningful to anyone else, but it was seriously the highlight of my 2010. *** edit, to the op, sorry to jack your thread, this has nothing to do with hitchhiking. I sort of thought I could just get this off my chest, enjoy the catharsis and watch the story languish at the bottom of the page. Glad people like hearing the tale and I hope it moves you to be more helpful in your day-to-day. Ha 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 he ha. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to Reddit said it. Or don't, I'm not your boss.